Hi, it's Dr. Fox, and today I want us to talk about the anxiety-prone personality. With everything that is currently going on, stress is on the rise. A lot of people are having a greater difficulty managing that stress, so I thought I would make a video on those individuals and the personality components that make up the anxiety-prone personality. Now, there are certain personality types and traits that are prone to anxiety, and with all of these anxious times, with COVID-19 and everything going on with that, and all these other issues and concerns and things like that, I think it's important for folks to recognize if you are anxiety prone, and most people are aware, right, because you feel that anxiety all the time, that there are things that you can do. There are things that you can do to better manage that anxiety. So let's go through it and we'll see if you match the anxiety-prone personality. Now, in this video, again, I'm going to talk about the personality types and traits that make up that prone individual, that prone personality type, and then we'll talk about what you can do about it. And if you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe. That would be great, because we're trying to put out good, positive information for folks so they can learn about their personality disorder, or other aspects, and perhaps they can help themselves, or perhaps lead them in a direction where they can get the help that they need. Let's get into it. So the anxiety-prone personality types and traits. This includes that type A personality individual, right? And your type A, and we've all heard this. What's that type A personality? Well, these are individuals that are highly driven, and sometimes they're overly structured. And what happens is that they engage in this behavior a lot of times to provide a sense of control for their life. And what happens, that type A individual, that driven individual, the more structure they feel that they put in place, the greater control that they feel they have. The more that they achieve, the greater they feel like they can manage their own life. In a lot of instances, these are individuals that are able to achieve a lot, which is very good. That achievement type. Now, back in the day, there was that type B. That type B individual is kind of passive and kind of chill, kind of laid back, not necessarily lazy, but they are more easygoing. They're more just to accept sort of the flow of the day, whereas your type A person wants to direct what is going on. And if you've seen my other videos, you know I talk about core content and surface structure content. Now, that core content for that type A is usually control. Usually there's some type of fear a lot of times that drives that, right? We're not surprised to hear that anxiety is driven by fear. So identifying what that is can be really helpful for these folks. And it doesn't take their drive and control away. What it does, it lessens the negative aspect of that type A personality. Because type A personality individuals are also at a higher likelihood for stroke and heart attack. They are also at a greater likelihood for relationship problems. They are also at a greater likelihood for serial unemployment. Serial unemployment, that is, you go from like job to job to job, but maybe you're at a job for a while, but you burn out. You burn out your boss, you burn out your coworkers, whatever may happen, and then they let you go. Okay, so that's the type A personality. Now, also, there are individuals that have what's called an external locus of control. Now, external locus of control, this is that the behavior in view is external. It's influenced by outside forces, right, as opposed to their own decision. So that means, for example, so the reason why I am mad at you is because you did A, B, and C, as opposed to that the reason why I'm mad is because I feel this way, because it triggered this in me. And that external locus of control is obviously for a greater sense of control to make it seem that way. But the reality is that external locus of control is unhealthy. Now, there is an internal locus of control, and that is that my behavior directs the trajectory of my life and where I'm going. And the greater or the more solidified that internal locus of control, the greater actually the individual is in control of their life. They do have to accept the R word. The R word. That's tricky, right? And you're like, what's the R word? Let me tell you what the R word is. The R word is responsibility. And that external locus of control often puts that responsibility on the outside object. Could be a teacher, could be a boss, could be a loved one. And you see this a lot in personality disorders, is that they tend to possess an external locus of control. One facet does not make a personality disorder. Okay, so if you have that external locus of control, try to change your viewpoint a little bit. How could you make it more of an internal locus of control? What could you do to enhance your sense of self-power, control, and understanding? Now also, there are certain personality factors that can identify or that are present in that anxiety-prone individual. And these factors are also present in a lot of mental health disorders. So now we're going to talk about what's called the 5-factor model. And I'll put it up here. Now, as you can see, the 5-factor model, it also spells ocean, okay? And it's openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And like all personality disorders, right, these factors are on a spectrum. And at one end, for example, openness to experience, you see that it's consistent and cautious. But then on the high end, you see that these folks are inventive and curious. Now, if we go down to conscientiousness, you see that they're easygoing and careless, whereas on the high end, they're efficient and organized. There's extroversion, that's solitary and reserved on one end, and outgoing and energetic on the other. And then we see agreeableness is challenging and detached, and then on the high end, you see that they're friendly and compassionate. But then we have neuroticism, and on the low end, you have secure and confident, and then on the high end, you have sensitive and nervous. Now, the 5-factor model has been around for a really, really long time, and a lot of times when we do personality research, what will happen is we would do a factor analysis, and we would distill it down, and you would find these same 5 factors that would continue to be present. And then we could attribute to different personality types and styles and disorders and different types of issues related to personality to try to figure out what are the personality components associated with borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, anxiety-prone personality. Now, the associated mental health conditions that can be identified through these different personality factors is what we're going to talk about today, right? Specifically, we're going to talk about simple phobia, social phobia, agoraphobia, panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. But also, we're going to talk about major depressive disorder and dysthymia. And I'll talk about each of these really briefly and what they are. Then we're going to talk about the 5-factor model and what are those different factors that indicate these individuals are at a higher likelihood to experience that anxiety-prone personality. So simple phobia, that's like if you're afraid of snakes or if you're afraid of the dark, things like that. So it's an identified simple phobia. Now social phobia is that you're afraid of being embarrassed in front of others, so you have an intense level of anxiety. Agoraphobia is that you're afraid to go out. But in some cases, a lot of folks with agoraphobia will go out with an identified safe other. And then we have panic disorder. Panic disorder is that you have panic attacks, and the fear of another panic attack disrupts the function of your life. Now, I'm simplifying all of these disorders. The simplification that I'm talking about does not mean if you're like, hey, I kind of have that. That doesn't mean that you meet the qualification for the disorder. I'm just simplifying to kind of explain it to you. Obsessive compulsive disorder means that you have an obsessive thought about something. A lot of times it's cleanliness, order, safety, and then you engage in a compulsive behavior that lessens the anxiety associated with the obsession. And then we have generalized anxiety disorder. This is this generalized sort of worry about many things. And then we also have major depressive disorder. Now, how could depressive disorder and dysthymia, how could that be associated with anxiety prone? Because it is actually, they're on the same cycle. And what happens is that a lot of folks that are very anxious and they experience that anxiety for a period of time, and they're on the top end of this cycle. And when you're on the top end, that's a lot of anxiety, lot of anxiety, lot of anxiety, lot of anxiety. And what happens is you start to get burnt out, right? Your brain, your body starts to get burnt out. So then you fall into the lower end of this cycle, and that is the depression. Sometimes it's just a depressive episode. Sometimes it's sadness. Sometimes it's fatigue. So it can be a whole host of things. Doesn't necessarily mean that you qualify. Some people do qualify for a major depressive disorder or episode. And so major depressive disorder is not sadness. So I think a lot of times in a lot of societies around the world, there's great confusion between sadness and depression. Sadness is that you're sad about something, is that you're kind of bummed about something happened, you're like, oh man, I'm really sad. And that goes away in a period of time. When we talk about depression is a clinical condition. And that depression is that intensified sadness stays with you for an extended period of time, and it is difficult to get out of bed, it's difficult to eat, it's difficult to shower, is that your caring for self and others is significantly diminished. So you don't care if your kids eat lunch or breakfast or whatever, you don't care what your spouse is doing, you don't care what your hair looks like or if you smell a little bit because you haven't been showering. I have had clients in the past that have had such extreme depression that they have not gotten out of their bed to go to the restroom. Think about that. Yes, that means that they go to the restroom in their bed and they don't get out. That's extreme depression. And then you have dysthymia. Dysthymia is, these are folks that there's a baseline of functioning and they're just below that. So it's like this ongoing sadness and negative view of life and self. And that is this continual view. And that view causes disruption. Sometimes it's hard to maintain employment. Sometimes it's hard to maintain friendships. So there is a disruption associated with that low-grade depression, but it's not as severe as that major depressive episode. And the major depressive episode, it can be single, it can be one continuous, or it can be up and down. So it can be recurrent. Okay, so we know now that anxiety and depression, that they're on different sides of the same cycle. Okay, so what about which of these 5 factors associated with these anxiety disorders and depression that I just talked about? Well, it's actually neuroticism. It's the high end of neuroticism, or you're closer to the high end, right? Now on that spectrum, you could be high in one aspect, low in another, what it may be. But they find, a lot of the research finds, that individuals that are high on the neuroticism factor, that they tend to experience that simple phobia, social phobia, agoraphobia, panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, and dysthymia. So you see that high level of neuroticism, that these folks, they're sensitive and nervous. So, and sensitive doesn't mean they're sensitive like to your conditions and your issues, but that they are sensitive to what's going on in the world, and that makes them very anxious and nervous and neurotic. Right? And so they're very, oh my God. And all of that anxiety, right, puts them on that cycle that we just talked about. And that kind of makes sense, right? So what about the other factors? Well, social phobia, agoraphobia, and dysthymia. Now, those have been found to be associated with low extroversion. Now that low extroversion, that's solitary and reserved. So these are folks, right, that are kind of more to themselves. And think about that, does it make sense, right? Those that are high in social phobia, agoraphobia, right, and dysthymia, these are folks that they're very reserved. They don't want to go out much. They want to kind of stay to themselves. They want to limit their social engagement. They want to try to limit their environment to the best that they can. So it kind of fits, right? We have also found that these folks are high on openness to experience. And that openness to experience are folks that are inventive and curious. Now think about that. Inventive and curious. Now you may say, oh, well, but those are positive traits. Those are positive things, and that's true. They are in a lot of ways. But pair that inventive and curious with that solitary and reserved. So I'm curious in that I'm exploring the environment, but solitary and reserved. So what would that tell you? That would tell you that I'm vigilant to what's going on in the outside world to see if perhaps I'm going to be harmed or to see if I'm going to be manipulated. So what happens is that I develop this social phobia, agoraphobia, dysthymia, right? and it impairs my functioning, or this is how I function. So take a moment and see, okay, what do you think that you are high on? Now, there are some like quizzes and things like that that you can do online. If you want to do those things, there are actually different universities that have studies that still study the 5-factor model. If you want to take some of those tests, you can Google them. Don't just take a random test to see where you qualify or for a different disorder, things like that. Please don't do that. Obviously, when you take those tests, there's a high likelihood that you are going to always come out positive for the test, whether it's borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, any of those things, bipolar disorder, whatever it is, or this 5-factor model. They're going to show you the most impaired result that they can, because what happens is that engages you to continue to learn more, stay on their site longer, do more clicks, things like that. There are universities that do research on personality. I don't want to list any. There are actually several out there, but some of them do have studies where folks can just take them and you can click it. If you Google the 5-factor model, universities or whatever it may be, some of those will probably come up. Don't just take some random ones. Oh, free personality test. Please don't do that. You're going to be skewed towards the negative, and that's going to make you more anxious and more worried and more concerned. And that is, of course, going to, if you are high on neuroticism, that, of course, is going to trigger that, and you're going to have more of that worry and that anxiety and that concern. And that sensitivity is going to be kicked off, and that nervousness. Okay, so it's important that you are aware of that. But if you do have this anxiety-prone personality, what can you do to lessen that anxiety? The most important thing is not to overconsume the data that's out there. Don't spend all this time on the internet. Don't try to research everything over and over and over and over and over again. Talk to your doctor. Talk to experts who understand the conditions you're going through. And if you look online, you're going to find more and more information that skews you towards the negative. And because when you're skewed towards the negative, when we get anxious, we want to consume everything. Now, during the COVID-19, it's negative. And there are some positives. There are folks that are recovering from it. There are folks that are managing it. There are different areas where the numbers are flattening out, things like that. But instead, we hear more about the negative. And what happens is because we get fixated, right? And we start watching. And as you watch, you become more anxious. You lose that sense of self-control and self-discipline. And we become more anxious, and you have less self-control, and you may become less open to experience. So you become more conditioned to stay reserved, to stay in your place. Okay? So it's important that if you want to obviously learn about COVID-19, we all want to learn more about it and know what's going on and what's happening. Give yourself 15-30 minutes to watch a few times a day, and please don't watch before bed. It will disrupt your sleep cycle. It'll make it difficult for you to go to bed. So don't do that. Don't watch news at the end of the day. Watch something funny, The Simpsons, Seinfeld, something like that. Whatever it is, Big Bang Theory, whatever you like. But something funny is good, and you'll sleep better. Now, also, with all the COVID-19 stuff, you want to prepare, not panic. Okay, so you want to prepare. Now, don't panic buy, and we know, I think we're past that phase here where I live, because the stores were empty. Now they're starting to get some stuff. So don't panic, but prepare. What do you need? And think about it. Make a list and be organized. Be conscientious. Okay? If you're low on that conscientiousness and high on neuroticism, remember we talked about that, right? And that puts you into that anxiety, that generalized worry, social phobia, and other. It could be panic disorder if you reach that level where you have panic. So again, you want to prepare, not panic. Okay. Now, if you talk to your kids and your significant other honestly and openly about what's going on, and people that have anxiety or that are anxiety prone, they tend to be very reluctant to talk about their true feelings about what is going on. Sometimes it's shame, sometimes it's embarrassment, sometimes it's a whole host of issues, and they themselves may not even know what it is. But it's important to talk to your kids and to talk to your significant other about what's going on and how they feel about what's going on. And that should also give you an opportunity to talk about how you feel of what's going on. And it's okay to take a moment and kind of get your thoughts together, right? What do you think is going to happen today? What do you think is going to be going on next week? And take some time and think about it. If you feel that anxiety come up, do some deep breathing, just take a moment and relax. And remember, you can have control. And just talk to individuals, and talking it out can be very empowering. That external locus of control, if you have that can make you very, very anxious, because you're like, well, I need this answer back for me to be okay. I need to know that everything is okay, right? We talked about the news consumers, and you're out there and you're watching. And so that's an external locus of control. So I'll be okay by listening to the outside. I mean, of course, right? Washing our hands, taking care of ourselves, social distancing, all of these other things are factors as well. So talking about it can help lessen a lot of those fears, and it can give you a sense of support, because a lot of us feel the same way about what is going on right now. And remember that when you consume information, get accurate information. There's all kinds of false stuff floating on out there. Facebook is not somewhere to get news. I don't care what it is. Facebook is not the place to get news. Social media is not the place to get news, because you don't know if it's real or if it's not. And I'm not getting into the whole fake news thing. What I'm talking about is that there are certain outlets for information. Social media is not it, because you have people that make up stuff. I got something from AT&T the other day. It looked so real, right? And I'm like, oh, okay. And they're like, oh, we need to verify your email. And I'm like, wait, why do you need to verify my email? You just sent me an email, right? So that's because they sent it out probably to 2 million people. And and I was going to click. I'm like, wait a minute. And I looked to see where it came from, and it came from like AT&T phone with an F and all this other stuff. I'm like, almost got me, but you didn't. So that's the thing, right? Is that we want to go to accurate sources. We want to make sure that the information we're getting is accurate and on point, and not to get us more anxious. And if you're anxiety prone, you know that it's easy to get thrown in that direction, right? That your equalizer can go all the way up. And so then you consume. And we want to get accurate and honest information from reliable sources. And then focus on prevention, right? So keep discussing preventative actions, right? We talked about, I alluded to that, and we hear them all the time, and it's true, right? Wash your hands, social distance, right? Try to stay away from big crowds, things like that. What can we do that's preventative? But when we talk about anxiety proneness, what can we do that is preventative? And even, where you are in that 5-factor model, it adjusts. It's not set in stone. If you're high on neuroticism and low on conscientiousness, that doesn't mean that that's where you'll be forever. It doesn't mean that you can't change your personality or those personality factors and where you fall. You absolutely can. It's going to take a little work, and I think that's where therapy can come in, or a mental health provider or something like that can help you to adjust your personality equalizer, right? And make it a little more balanced, and lessen that neuroticism, and increase that conscientiousness. And now, for example, extroversion. Do you need to be extroverted? No. People that are higher on extroversion, but not to the pathological point, actually do tend to have a little more success, have a little more engagement. But isn't that because they're out there and they're seeing more opportunities? Yes. But now with the internet, folks that are more introverted are actually having a lot of success because they're working from home, or they're working more solitary conditions where the social engagement component isn't present. So, and then lastly, be mindful. Be mindful of the present. This is where we are, and this is what we're dealing with. And this will pass as well. But right now, this is where we are, and this is what we're dealing with. And it'll be okay in the end. It'll be okay in the end. And just take some time and practice mindfulness. And mindfulness can be great. There's all sorts of things on mindfulness that's out there that you can learn. It's interesting. I like to do the drone videos, right? Just kind of watch the drone video. I've talked about that before. They go over like Hawaii or beaches and stuff, and I think that's really cool. There's some cities and things. That's really nice because it can help you kind of chill and just relax and just be in the present. Because the anxiety wants you future focused. The anxiety wants you nervous about what's going to happen in 5 minutes, what's going to happen in 5 minutes, what's going to happen in 2 minutes. Oh my God, what's going to happen? But instead, when we stay mindful and we stay present, we have a greater sense of control about how we feel and how we interact with the world around us. And I hope you found this video helpful. If you'd like other sort of 5-factor model videos where we talk about these different factors, I'm always happy to do it. I love talking about the 5-factor model. I think it's very interesting. So please let me know, leave any comments, and thank you for your time and attention. And please be well and please take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.